Boom. All right. So, because it's fall break Thursday, uh, earlier in the year, I had a class. I think it was Labor Day. My Monday group, you all missed Monday because of Labor Day, but my Thursday class still had to have class. So I recorded a lecture. You all watched it. Then my Thursday class, I taught it to them. Yay! Basically, the same thing's happening this week. My Thursday class does not have class, so I'm recording the lecture tonight, and then they get to see all that. Now, the benefit for all of you is it's a short week technically because of fall break, meaning I have to be light on like homework and everything because technically you have less time to do everything because you technically don't have to work on I can't make you do anything due on Thursday or Friday. I can on Sunday. So this lecture is the lecture that I would usually give on a Thursday, which is only like an hour and 15 minutes. I purposely structured the class, and if you look at our syllabus, you'll see that Thanksgiving week and fall break week, it's a shorter lecture in that we only do we do like chapters that are not in the book. They're just from me, basically. And this week, the only thing you have to do is the lecture question and the homework. So there's no case study, there's no assessment, there's nothing due for the final project. Very, very light week. So we're going to go through the international management slides. There is no reading that you need to do out of the textbook for this. I know. Everything on the homework is in these slides. So you don't need anything else. These slides in my lecture is all you need for this week. And then so when you do the lecture question, you knock out the homework after this, you're done. Go home, celebrate, fall break. Though, like I was telling you beforehand, most of my students are non-traditional in that they're typically adults that are working full-time and take classes, and none of them, what is fall break, right? Fall break's a pain when you get older because your kids are out of school, and it gets harder. So that's what we're all dealing with. Action plan was due yesterday. I haven't got to grade them yet. I typically grade on Tuesdays. I think most of you all have probably caught on to that. I usually grade on Tuesdays. I usually grade everything at once. Nobody's ever accused me. One class accused me one time of being slow at grading, and they were probably right, but it was like during my dissertation. I tend to grade usually like 48, 72 hours after everything's due, so you all get it. Professors stick to that? How fast do the professors grade?
Could be a week, could be the same day.
Oh, it's just varied?
Yeah, it depends what professor.
Okay.
I've had one that like a week and a half after a major assignment was due, we finally get the grade back and like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I wasn't stressing about this or anything.
What about you? How long?
I mean, there's some teachers just go about it automatic. So if I send the assignment right away, I get a grade right away.
Yeah, automatic. That's okay. That doesn't count. I've got a few on the homeworks are graded automatically, except for my MBA students because they've got more in their homework. I've always tried to go off the I think 24 hours is unreasonable because there's like 120 of you all. It's some of the stuff. It's like impossible. Even going through your lecture questions takes a long time. I think 48, 72 hours is pretty good. I love it. I sat down at my computer on a Tuesday. I kick on Netflix. I'm watching Love is Blind right now. Leave me alone. I've watched every season with my wife, and I have a great time, and I'm not going to apologize for it.
Should though.
I'm not going to. Speaking of last night, in the spirit of Halloween, I was working, and my wife walked into my office and said, "Hey, you should stop working and come watch the show with me." And I said, okay. And I walked out, and she proceeded to show me the first episode of the Netflix show Monster, which is about Ed Gein, the guy who Texas Chainsaw Massacre is based off of. And I was not prepared for that. And I love horror. I watched that first episode of her, and I was like, whoa, all right. I guess I'll just go to bed and pretend that didn't happen. Great show. Can't say enough good things about it. Anyway. We are talking about international management today. There are only about 19 slides here. We're going to go through them. I'm going to get a little bit of water, and then I'm going to show you a brief case study. I'm actually going to turn off the record. Well, we'll run the recorder for that, but my MBA students don't have to listen to that part because they do the case study on their own, and they have their own video, and it's more, and it's bigger, and it's, I don't want to say better, but it's longer, that's for sure. We started at 5:30, and I think we'll be able to get out of here by 6:45, 6:30. Pretty great, right? Go start your fall break.
This is my only in-person class.
Oh, great. Then you really can start your fall break. So, we are covering international management. I had two big problems with your textbook. One, they use a few theories and a few structures to teach things that are kind of, I don't want to say out of date. They're actually not out of date. They're just not used. And I always highlight those. I always tell you. Like the book talks about the DISC. We don't do the DISC. We do the Big Five because the disk is great and everything, but the Big Five is more credible. And there's a few things like that. They use Lewin's force field, and a lot of people use that. The other thing is they don't have an international management section and they don't have an ethics section. And that's weird. Most textbooks have to have an ethics section nowadays if it's business related, and they don't have one. So because of that, I've created an international management chapter and I've created an ethics, lecture, I should say, for all of you. So really when we talk about international management, a lot of it is focused around this idea of globalization, something that I'm sure you have got to hear about in many, if not all, of your classes at some point in business. So it's the trend that the world's economy is moving to being more interdependent than more solo. Now, being interdependent is not something new at all. I mean, you can go all the way back to like the original, colonists coming here and all the trade we were doing overseas with France and everything. We've always been interconnected to a degree. However, it's become basically absurd, and it's getting faster and faster and more, even within my lifetime, from when I could really understand business to any degree at 10 years old, over the next 25 years, how things have changed. Now, it's very, very important, since you are all taking a class in an American business college, to know that the United States is far and beyond the biggest player in the economy, and so globalization is the biggest factor here as opposed to anywhere else in the world. We do the most global trade. We have the most global trading partners. Most countries want to trade with the United States. There is, and I'm not sitting here having this like rah, go USA moment. I am going as an economist originally by trade to say that one thing that is actually understated about the United States is our dominance economically in the world. It is vastly understated, and no matter how much it's overstated, if that makes sense, no matter how much you hear in the news that the United States economy is large, it is understated to the degree that it is. The United States has the largest GDP. It's not close. Number 2 is China. Most people know that. But that's not the biggest discrepancy here. The biggest discrepancy here is when we measure economy, we typically measure it multiple ways. GDP is a good standard measurement, but a better measurement is what we call GDP per capita, which is each person in the country, how much are they producing, right? So when we compare the United States and China, there's been this belief that like China was rapidly catching up to the United States, but the big gap was because the population of China is so vast, the average person within that country is producing about an eighth as much as the average American, and that matters because they still consume at roughly the same rate. So the United States produces 8 times as much as the second biggest competitor, but consumes roughly the same rate. We actually consume slightly more, but not much. So the United States is gigantic. If the United States tomorrow fell out of the global economy, basically the world would collapse. Like no other economy could survive if the United States fell out. Even people that don't trade with directly because of proxy trades, it would be massive. Now, that's a big statement. I'm sure somebody would argue, like, no, everything would stabilize, and that may be true. But it matters because of this. The United States is very involved internationally. All of our companies, our large companies, are connected internationally. If you ever work for a large Fortune 500 company, it is more likely that you are going to be working internationally to some degree. So taking a college class on international business in the United States, it is almost more important for you, like to know that if you work here in the United States, you're going to have to work globally. And, we live in Little Collinsville, Oklahoma, and my wife works with people all around the world, right? So it is what it is. Now, to really fuel this globalization, it's no longer just trade with boats going overseas, bringing spices and all that stuff. And the way that e-commerce or the way that globalization has worked is not just our speed of transportation, but it is also vastly due to the growth of e-commerce or electronic commerce. This is basically buying and selling products or services through computer networks to some degree. It's drastically increased. We are up to 1.192 trillion as of 2024. It's much higher now. COVID-19 had a weird effect because it decreased globalization temporarily, but it drastically increased electronic commerce. And now globalization is catching back up. So we have, our companies are more interconnected than they were during COVID-19, but e-commerce has definitely drastically shot up. Now, I'm so old that when I watch Shark Tank still, on Shark Tank, people come on there and they're always making a product and they always ask them, how are you selling this? And people always say, I'm selling it online through my own website or whatever, right? And as soon as they say that, I always think, who's buying that? Nobody's buying something from your website. And the only thing I buy online is Amazon, basically. And I have found that I'm very wrong. E-commerce is allowed small companies, large companies, everybody to basically compete on the global market because people are much more are comfortable buying online through all these retailers. When I was younger, if you bought something online through somebody, it was kind of a shady thing. You would buy and put your credit card information in and hope it wasn't a scam. And then you had this fun, wait 2 weeks and hope that what you ordered shows up, and it's not like that at all anymore. Now we're going to talk a little bit about role. I missed my E in role of AI in e-commerce globalization. Ooh, click twice. So this slide, I've done this lecture for about a year or so, but just recently we started getting better data on AI and how it's going to affect e-commerce and globalization. The first one comes from the Financial Times, and this is interesting. The World Trade Organization believes that AI is going to boost global trade by 40% by 2040. Well, that's pretty massive. A 40% increase in the next 15 years is insane. Excuse me. So we can expect, an increase in globalization overall because of AI use, and we can talk about why that is. However, there is kind of a weird inverse effect that's happening, and we don't know what's going to come about this, but it's actually causing poorer countries to be at a massive disadvantage. If you don't know, AI is really expensive, and it's really intensive. It costs a lot of resources and a lot of energy to run. The United States and China are pretty good with our AI development, and we put a lot of resources into it, but because it is so expensive, poorer countries are at a massive disadvantage and cannot keep up and cannot run this AI program the same. So we don't know what's going to happen from a globalization standpoint, in that companies in larger developed countries are going to be much more interconnected than ever before, but it may be that we're actually less interconnected than we were globally originally. This is actually a trend across multiple sectors. When I did my dissertation, originally, when I did my dissertation, you go to a board and they tell you, you give them your study idea and you tell them what you want to do. And then your committee basically says, we want you to do X, Y, and Z. And my committee told me they wanted me to change my study to what's called experience sampling data. And it is a very intensive, expensive type of data collection and data analysis. Somebody else in my cohort did their dissertation on as an ESM study, and it costs around $45,000 for them to do it, but the university just pays for it, right? I did a lot of the manual labor myself, and it cost me $15,000 roughly to do it. Yeah, it's pretty great. It takes a very, very long time. It's very intensive. It's very expensive. However, there's kind of this gatekeeperness going on where all the top journals and all the top scientists will only accept studies that are ESM if you do this time. And so what's happened is when we used to get science from all over the world, it's actually getting more and more limited because these other countries can't afford or keep up, or, like a PhD student in a country that doesn't, university doesn't have the money, can't do that. And so things like AI and things like ESM, which ESM has some AI components to it, are becoming more reserved for those that already have the advantage to begin with. I got my PhD at Oklahoma State. It's a very, very rich business program. They're 9th in the country. And when they signed off on it, they basically just wrote me a check and I just did it. But you getting your PhD somewhere else, it may not be that way. And so this is what we're seeing with AI. I wish there was a way to turn off. There's got to be a way to turn off the leaving and coming in Zoom sound, right? Yeah, surely. Yeah, it's always so. Nobody's fault. If you guys have to leave or come, it's fine. But it's always so distracting to me. Now, sectors that are exposed to AI have seen 5 times the growth of those less exposed sectors. Some sectors are naturally more exposed to AI. Industries like software, telecom. Excuse me. Oh, you don't have to apologize, Robert. It's not your fault that you're coming and going and it's making sounds. It's just, I've always wondered if I could turn that off because it always makes the sound and it's loud in the room. But industries like software, telecom, finance typically have more AI exposure. These sectors already grow at a pretty high rate, but because of AI, they're seeing 5 times the growth rate as opposed to less exposed sectors. I'm sure science has also increased, quantitative and qualitative, because of AI. And labor workforce dynamics. Here's a controversial one for everybody. World Economy Forum predicts that by 2025, there will be 75 million jobs displaced globally by AI, but predict 133 million new jobs would be created. Now, the one thing that the World Economy Forum did not say is that the expectation is we will lose jobs before gaining jobs. So it'll be more like jobs will start going down and then start coming up, right? To like as more jobs are basically created. People have been worried about this for a long time. Paycom announced 2 weeks ago that they're doing layoffs because of AI. Basically, AI is taking over certain jobs. That was kind of one of the first big scares that kind of freaked everybody out, is that Paycom started laying people off because AI was essentially taking their jobs. However, this is the first time there's been a technology advancement that has led to layoffs and then eventually more jobs. And everybody was worried that it would take over people's jobs in the past. Like this has happened multiple times throughout human history. Some people believe that AI is going to be the exception and it's going to be the one that just ends it all. But I will tell you, study history. They've said that about everything, right? That like this is going to be the one that ends it all and everybody loses their jobs and they're never replaced.
Listen, the steam engine is going to ruin every transport job. They'll
That's
never have a
right.
driver again.
That's right. Yeah, that's what it's always been, right? But usually it goes the other direction. I was taught when I was doing my PhD in science that AI will never replace my job, but the scientists that learn how to leverage it will. And so, like, they didn't shy away from us leveraging AI. But yeah, so it'll be interesting. But the belief is AI is going to make the globe more interconnected, at least larger countries, and it's going to create more international jobs. There's always fear that it's going to start segregating larger countries away from the smaller countries, and maybe we'll lose more jobs than we gain. But who's to know? Now, because of Shark Tank, America believes that there are tons of entrepreneurs out there and lots of small companies, right? That is like a belief. I got to work with a gentleman whose PhD dissertation was on basically Shark Tank, and he did like a bunch of things with it and like the illusion of it and all this stuff. And what he told me was that because of the fame of the show, which it is like nationally a very popular show, at least it was at its height, right? Very, very popular. And then, Hulu came out and it was on Hulu and it was great. We believe that there was like lots of entrepreneurs and lots of small companies. However, that was kind of an illusion. At the time Shark Tank came out, there was a decrease of about 40% of entrepreneurs over the last 15 years. So entrepreneurship's actually gone down. People are more likely to work for large companies than to create their own company. And this has gotten, I don't know if worse or better is the right word to say. It has increased because of this idea of one big world market. We now have more mega firms than ever before and more mergers on the rise. If you have a large company in the United States and they do something really, really well, it's more likely that they will just open up more stores in other countries and kind of expand out that way, right? Than it is that a company within another country will do what they're doing and create their own company, right? It's more likely to expand internationally now than ever before. We see more mergers as companies realize this is very common internationally because if I do something well here in the United States, it may not translate perfectly if I go do it in Japan because of cultural differences. But if there's somebody similar to me in Japan being really successful doing roughly what I'm doing, mergers are more common because they already have structure in place. They've got people that understand the culture. They have managers that understand the culture. So mergers are more common. And that's what we're seeing a lot now. And that's why I tell you, if you live in the United States and you work for a company, it's way more likely that you're going to be working internationally because it's way more likely that your firm is becoming a mega firm and working across borders. See, that guy was like, I hate that. And he left. That's what I think immediately. But also, to give the little guy some credit here, many firms are now operating worldwide, but they used to not. I love T3 coffee. I love coffee. I was going to get you T3 coffee at some point. T3 is right down the road in Collinsville, Oklahoma. Collinsville is a very, very tiny town. And when you're going down there in the little corner, there's a little coffee shop called T3. They brew, they roast all their own beans, then he grinds them and brews them fresh. It's amazing coffee. And I buy T3 coffee by the pound in all these bags. And when I go visit friends, I always bring them a bag of T3. I'm always like, boom, anytime I visit anybody, because it's really, really good coffee and it's interesting. And I want to support this small business. And I buy from this guy named Gary who owns the place. And it's just a small little coffee shop. And he told me the other day, you know, your friends can just order it from us because they have an online site and they ship internationally. And I was like, what? This little tiny itty bitty coffee. You open up the door, you can see the back of the coffee shop like immediately right there. It's like a little tiny, it's like this room, right? And he brews it all and makes it all right there in front of you. But he sells internationally because it's much more common for many firms. He told me that it's basically, it almost costs him nothing to do it now because he can, all the labeling and setting up a website and all that stuff is now free and streamlined. It used to be when I was a kid, I had one friend set up a company that he sold online. He had to hire somebody to design the website for him. Yeah. And to set everything up. Now they have websites you can go to that create the website for you. And with AI, it creates it well, like it looks good. And then selling things internationally. Hell, if you want to pair with Amazon, they'll basically do all the shipping for you and take a cut of it. Had to write a book, send it to Amazon, helping my friend write this book. And I was like, oh, publishing is going to be a bitch. Nope. Amazon will print it, ship it all over for you, and just take 20 cents. And so you can just do it everywhere.
God bless Jeff Bezos.
I mean, it's best. He definitely helped internationally. So because of this, many firms are able to operate more internationally. And that's good for the consumer because now if I want to buy coffee, I can get online and there's a million different offers. Do you know who Death Wish is? Do you know Death Wish Coffee? Yeah, Death Wish Coffee was a super tiny coffee company started by one man in a tiny place who basically used Amazon to ship it. And he shipped it through Amazon for a while, and it got big enough that now it's in Walmart. Yay. And he was just some dude making coffee that could sell it online.
They went with Black Rifle Coffee.
Black Rifle Coffee, too. They had a great social media campaign, too.
Yeah.
So
I can't believe they went from just making coffee grounds to making their own energy drinks. So
I
like
didn't know that.
QT.
No, I didn't know that at all. I just know their coffee's strong.
Yeah,
I've never
good.
bought Black Rifle, but my wife's family is all military, and so all their coffee is Black Rifle coffee.
It's good.
That's what I hear. Is that what you're drinking?
No, this is QT.
Okay, it's not Black Rifle coffee. So why do companies expand internationally? This should be obvious for most of you. Availability of supplies, things that may not be readily available here, but are elsewhere. New markets, lower labor costs, which is the controversial one. Access to financial capital, and avoidance of tariffs and import quotas. There are companies that have done things such as, I want to create, I build widgets and I ship them to Canada and they're getting tariffed on their way in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a manufacturing firm in Canada and I will just sell them out of that firm there and it dodges the tariffs. And then Canada's okay with that because the jobs are taken by Canadians. And I'm not picking on Canada, this is just a random example, right? And so sometimes they expand internationally to avoid these tariffs or they find someone that's not going to tariff them. As far as new markets go, once you reach saturation, that's what a lot of companies do. If you watch the NFL, which I love the NFL, and me and my wife were talking about this the other day, on Sundays, I usually sleep in. Because we go to church at 10:45, I wake up at 10, last minute. 30 minutes is how long it takes me to get ready, dressed, out the door. But I started waking up at 8 o'clock on Sundays. My wife asked me why, and it's because there's an NFL kickoff at 8:30 every Sunday now because they play international games almost every single Sunday. That is because the NFL is the largest sport in the United States. The NFL prints money, but they announced probably like 5-6 years ago that they were going to make a big pitch for international markets because they're basically saturating the American market. They're not getting that many new fans, right? Like if I name a bunch of NFL teams, even if none of you watch the NFL, you've heard of them. So there's no more exposure that needs to be had. So they're looking for new markets. How do you get bigger? They've got to go to other countries that play football and not football. And they've got to make it bigger.
Real football, not that.
Real football.
Not European football.
Yeah. That is actually funny though. I think everybody, even if you don't like American football, could appreciate this because the NFL is trying to expand internationally. The NFL is interesting in that it's a company, but it's comprised kind of like 32 tiny companies because of all the teams. So I'm calling it a gold rush right now, where teams are trying to capture the market of the areas the NFL is moving to. So I think it was Brazil. They were going to host a game in Brazil. So Kansas City, the Kansas City Chiefs, put together a massive yacht that was covered in Kansas City logos and started floating it up and down the canals in Brazil, throwing out merchandise to random people because they're trying to capture the Brazilian market to be Kansas City fans. They just got to get there first. And like my wife said, yeah, if you throw a shirt out of a car, like out of a boat to somebody, whatever team's on that is now your team, right? If you don't watch the sport, it's like, yeah, this is me now. Like how many Americans are Manchester United fans because the stuff's here? Yeah. So
The only reason I own any NFL shirts is because they were free.
I have so many NFL shirts for teams I don't support because people bring them back to me. They're like, you're an NFL fan? Bam.
I'll get you a Jets jersey.
Oh, gosh.
Best team.
I can support the Giants, but I also support Detroit because they've never won the Super Bowl, and for some reason that inspires me.
They never will.
And they would never will, but it inspires me. Also, we expand globally because of access to talent. And this is where it's going to get a little bit controversial here. 159% increase in remote work between 2005 and 2022. Before COVID, there was a massive spike in remote work. That's important to know. Now, COVID basically made us do what we were already going to do, but right away, right? Just had to immediately do it, had to switch to it. There also has been a drastic increase in offshoring. My wife works for a company, Granicus, and as they needed more people to fill project manager roles, they started hiring out of Puerto Rico. Apparently, Puerto Rico has lots of people that get their project managing license. I don't know why. And they started hiring out of Puerto Rico. So a ton of my wife's employees are from Puerto Rico. Now, I always feel bad for them because they operate on Central Standard Time here in the United States. So I can only imagine that's kind of rough on them. But they take the job. They're paid very well for it.
Puerto Rico, those people are lucky. All the benefits of being an American, but no federal tax. They just can't vote. But I'd give that up.
You'd give that up for no federal tax? Yeah, that's
no
fair.
federal tax.
Because of this access to talent, we also have a talent competition. Now we're slowly getting into the part where it gets a little more controversial here, and I'll ask. More competition among employees because we have a larger access to talent pools because we can expand internationally. This is actually something you see with some universities, not a university like NSU. NSU is becoming more blended, meaning that we do research and teaching. So our professors are here, do research for the university. Some universities, typically really small ones, are very teaching focused only. They only teach, but also they do lots of virtual, kind of like we're doing here, but like fully virtual. But also they have professors that don't have to be on site at all, right? So they just, boom. Well, that makes it so they can pay less, essentially, because there's people across the country that will willingly take your job and work, remotely. I have universities reach out to me through email all the time to ask if I'll teach like a certain class or create a class for their online, whatever. And I don't do it because I think it's a conflict of interest for NSU. But also at the same time, you can get on my YouTube and watch all my lectures anyway. But you don't get the certificate that says you did, and that's all that people really are after, Yeah. So all my information's online, but it won't matter unless you take my class, unfortunately. Now, what is interesting though, is with an increase in talent or larger talent pools, it makes it more difficult to get jobs because you're competing against more people. However, what's a little counterintuitive is it actually leads to wage premiums. That's very against economic theory. which economic theory is if lots of people are willing to do the job, the best person will get the job, but that means I can pay you less because there's so many people willing to do the job, right? But it appears that with more access to talent and with more talented people getting the jobs, we're actually seeing wage premiums. People are getting paid more because they're the best of the best, if that makes sense, to actually get this position. Now, office locations can be more flexible. Areas with high talent means that, if I operate here in Oklahoma, but most of my talent is coming out of Southern California, it's much easier now for me to open an office in Southern California, where the majority of my talent is located. Now, risk and barriers, access to talent's not equal everywhere, and laws make remote work in different sectors varied. Now, these are the two kind of controversial things here that come about. One, remote work is definitely varied in different sectors. For instance, we teach in China, right? We have a relationship with the Chinese college there. We go there and do stuff there. However, remote work between us and China is a little bit more difficult because they have like the big firewall, right? They have certain jobs you can do here but aren't as acceptable over there. And so different countries, it's a little bit iffy if they'll allow remote work and what kind of work you're doing or not. My friend worked for a company that does federal contracting, right? This is just kind of a fun story. They do federal contracting. She had 8 employees. 2 of them were engineers who were from Russia, and they lived in Russia, and they worked remotely as engineers here. And as soon as Russia invaded the Ukraine, her company immediately fired both of them, right? Technically, it was a weird violation of HR policy and like laws in the United States to fire them based on that. However, there are federal laws that supersede that essentially step in and say if it's an international security risk, then you're justified. And no federal government was ever going to let her company be attacked for wrongful termination because they fired 2 Russian employees, because they technically had access to federal contracts, right? And not that anything was wrong with the 2 employees, and they didn't do anything shady at all. It was just, you're working remotely from Russia. That means we have an internet connection with you, and you're regularly checking in, and we deal with federal contracts, so I'm not sending anything over there, right? So that's where it gets kind of weird.
That's just bad luck for those 2 guys.
It's super bad luck. I knew one of them. They were great. There was nothing at all. They just were from Russia and got a job in the United States, and their country invaded the Ukraine and just got fired the next day. And we're making great money because they were good engineers, right? So they're probably doing fine now, but I mean, that is rough, right? But yeah, nothing they did just happened. And they also happen to be doing federal contracting. So not even anything important, not like good, fun contracts, like just dumb, like housing contracts is basically what it was.
They weren't the next skunk tank is what I'm hearing. They weren't the next skunk tank.
I don't know what skunk tank is.
Skunk tank?
Skunk tank?
Yeah, these are the people that made the F-16, the B-1 bomber.
Oh, I don't know.
They're like the secret wing of Lockheed Martin. They're insane level.
Okay, I don't know. I think the other question is, and this is something we've been debating for a long time, is should American firms be held to U.S. labor and environmental standards abroad? So this is like the controversial thing we talk about when we talk about access to talent. We talk about globalization and where people get into kind of fights over globalization here in the United States. And that is, Brent has company. They're getting fairly large. They're losing employees. They pay their employees an average of $80,000 to $100,000 for a position. When an employee leaves, they replace them with an employee from Puerto Rico, for example, who works the same job for $40,000 to $60,000 because that's the standard rate for that position there. So the company has an incentive to hire abroad. That takes away jobs from people's here, and it's cheaper. So there's been a debate about, well, should the United States be forced to hold a standard as if you hire international employees, do they have to be held to the same standard as your domestic employees, so you should be paying them the same, right? There's also the instances of the United States, your HR policy. We have pretty strict HR policy here in the United States, not compared to some like the Nordic countries, like I'll talk about later. But when you go international, if they have lighter HR policies, the United States firms do not have to follow those for those employees necessarily. There's kind of weird examples of like if you're providing healthcare and all this stuff, it gets weird. But that's kind of a question that's been passed around for a long time. Some people believe we should have like a blanket law that basically makes it whatever our standards are here in the United States have to be held abroad or better based on the region that you're hiring from. This is the one thing that is probably going to be the biggest barrier to globalization is the more intertwined we are. We work better. Globalization works better when I'm operating independently here and selling and trading to you, or I put a company over there that I own that operates within your domain, than when we're very interconnected. Like I've got half my employees there and half my employees here because you have different laws and standards there than I do over here. And so this is kind of a weird constant back and forth question that gets really, really touchy, right?
If we have the same working standards, how will we make, Nikes and sweatshops?
Well, that's right. It's like,
So impossible.
yeah, but this has been, if you ever look up like coffee fields or, the chocolate trade and stuff like that, it's like, why is Hershey's chocolate so cheap? Well, because we can pay people basically nothing to make it.
I mean, Mr. Beast, when he was trying to find a child-free chocolate market, he's like, there is no child-free chocolate market. All of them have child labor.
I'm so glad you know that. I've used that example before. Mr. Beast says that his is all ethically sourced, but he did make that statement when he started getting flamed when his chocolate company got so big that he was where he was sourcing it from, and he was getting attacked from where he was sourcing it, and he came out and said, "There's no ethical place."
The best he can. He's like, I pay them more than the average, and I help them go to school when they're there. But I really am. That's not my power. I'm like, that's reasonable.
It's hard. Yeah. So what I learned about international management, I already spoke about how you're probably going to deal with foreign customers and partners. You're going to deal with foreign employees and suppliers. You're most likely going to work, you may work for a foreign firm that is in the United States, or you may work for an American firm that is outside the United States. Very common if you're here in the US of A. Now let's get into some terms here. There are 3 types of essentially international managers that we talked about. Ethnocentric managers. These are people that believe that their native country, culture, language, and behavior is superior to others. So you were raised in the culture of the United States or whatever, or, you can even get it more tight-knit, say the Midwest of Oklahoma, and you believe that your culture, the way you do things, is superior to all others. So if you are working internationally, you have the belief that you should impose what you do there. So if I go work for a company overseas or I'm a manager overseas, I would take what I did here in the United States that was successful, and I believe it's the best way to run a company, and that's how I'm going to run it over there. Then you have polycentric managers. These are people that take the view that the native managers in foreign offices have the best understanding of that personnel. So it's like, I go look at, if I work here in the United States, and then I go work for the same company, or I travel abroad or whatever to work for my company overseas, I believe that the way the managers do it there, that are from there, are doing it the best, and that their culture is the best for that culture, basically. Now, science shows us that we need to hit the middle, which is geocentric managers, which accepts that there are differences and similarities between home and foreign personnel and practices, and they should use whatever technique is the most effective. A la the case study I'll talk about today, McDonald's. So McDonald's is like, we have our standard, we do things fast, this is our logo, this is how we do things. And then when we go internationally, we do about 60 to 70, 80% of what we do in the United States there. They change their menu, their manager and employee structure is a little bit different, but their franchising model is basically the same because that's what works here. And their kind of branding is basically the same overseas. That's geocentric. We preach geocentric because if your company gets big enough to expand internationally, it's because you have some sort of core competency that you do well. If you go into a polycentric mindset, you are basically admitting that you are going to give up that competitive advantage. You're going to give up what you do well. However, if you go full ethnocentric, then you are saying that what I do here will work everywhere. And that's not how it works. You need to stick to what you do well abroad, but also understand that there's going to have to be changes and differences. So easy to teach in a classroom setting and say these 3 things and say, see, yay. So much harder to put into practice. That's what it's called, parochialism. That's what I have highlighted right there. It's like people that really truly can't put themselves in somebody else's shoes, right? And this can be expanded in a lot of ways, but I get frustrated if my kids ever, well, my wife really gets frustrated because her family's so diverse. If my kids ever say something like something another person does from a different country is weird or makes no sense or anything like that, it drives me crazy because I'm like, what a narrow perspective. But they're kids, right? They've only seen things one way. But
The right way.
what's that?
The right way, the American way.
Yeah, see, that's a very ethnocentric manager standpoint. It works here. I remember traveling internationally. I think I said this on a video yesterday for a class I was recording. And we had people tell us that they could tell we were American because we walked with American swagger and confidence. They were like, nobody walks like that. I was like, oh, that sounds bad.
We walk with power in it. It's
Really straight up and loud is what I was told.
good.
So now we get to talk about those differences. We just talked about managers operating in different. Here's my button. There it is. I need my time because the time's on the screen for some reason. Oh, okay, cool. Crushing it. We have low context cultures and high tech context cultures. The United States is a low context culture. Now, in a second, I'm going to show you lots of parallels and differences. But as we talk about working internationally and how difficult it's going to be and bridging these culture divides, we're going to talk about some of the differences between cultures. The United States is low context, meaning basically it means that what we say is what we mean. Okay? And high context is you have to rely on the context of the situation to understand. At Oklahoma State, my first real research position was in the behavioral lab at Oklahoma State, and the head of the behavioral lab is Adea Freganet, who's from Ethiopia. And she told me that working in the United States for the last 5 years, that was the hardest thing for her to get used to here, was that her culture in Ethiopia is very high context, and that people don't say exactly what they mean, but you should read into the situation and understand what they mean. She said, for example, if my friend came over to my house and came in and I said, how are you? And they said, great, it's been a long day. Oh man, I'm hungry or I'm tired, right? She's like, I had to learn that Americans are just telling me I'm kind of hungry, I'm tired. That's it. But in Ethiopia, if someone said that, that was to imply to me, I should be making you a meal, or I'm wasting your time because you're tired. I need to make you coffee, like whatever, right? She's like, I had to learn that Americans would tell me, do you have anything to eat? They would just ask. And so she's like, I had to get used to that because there's so much context in what we say. But she said Americans are much more straightforward, and I had to get used to that about they would just tell me. She also, as she pointed out, somebody said sometimes it's low context and sometimes it just comes off as rude, like saying how it is, where we're just like, we appreciate that, but sometimes it's not as appreciated because you shouldn't be so direct. This is probably a big one. The reason I put it on its own slide is because studies have shown this is basically the biggest miscommunication between cultures, especially the United States and Asian cultures, such as South Korea, China, and Japan, is that our low context versus high context doesn't go over well in business meetings between managers of different regions. So that's something you have to be trained on. Just like when I was in my MBA, they taught us to shake hands different ways, right? And like one of the ways you shake hands when you're meeting somebody for the second time is like you shake hands, hey, how you doing, right? But you never do that internationally. You don't touch someone's shoulder that you don't know. They like made that a big deal.
Why? So just like
some Asian cultures, they told us you're not supposed to touch like that, like it's disrespectful, like in a business setting, right? Talking to my wife's siblings, they agreed. So in a business setting, when you're meeting for the first time, not appropriate to pat shoulders, right, or anything like that. But in my MBA, it's like an acceptable thing to do in some situations, right? So yeah. Oh, it's so fun. All the nuances, right? I think we should all just assume everybody means the best. We're all trying.
But how am I supposed to assume maliciousness?
Yeah, right.
Means the best.
So this is the Globes Project. We're going to get through this, then we may take a quick pause here because I've been talking for a while, and then come back and wrap it up and be done for the day here. The Globe Project was started in 1993 by Dr. House. It is a massive cross-culture investigation into what he calls the 9 cultural dimensions. I know they're kind of hard to read up here. Hopefully easier to read online. The 3 of you, sorry. But these are the 9 cultural dimensions. He believes rather, still going. We can basically take these 9 dimensions and every country can be scored high and low on them. And by scoring them high and low in these 9 dimensions, you can have a very strong understanding of what that culture is like, and that these 9 dimensions mostly encapsulate all the differences between cultures. That's the belief, that these are the things that matter, at least in our nice business sense. Don't worry, I have 2 slides for you here, and then more talking about it. We have this one, and then I have the one where I show you countries in each one. We have power distance. This is the degree to which a society's members are expect power to be unequally shared. So like we expect hierarchy versus not. Do we have one person that's like a dominant leader and that's very powerful everybody else, or do we expect everything to be more balanced, more even, a more flat organization? Uncertainty avoidance. Are we okay operating with an uncertainty? Taking risk is often tied to this. Or do we want to have no uncertainty? We need to know definitively everything before we make choices. Individualism versus collectivism. Are we okay with people making decisions based on themselves? Here in the United States, we tend to be more okay with that. Do what's best for you. If you leave your company, or if you're too stressed out or whatever, or you have to leave, we understand, right? Do what's best for you. In some cultures, it's more collectivism. It's that you should be considering more about how it affects everybody else than yourself. Then we have in-group collectivism. How much do we value our family, being close with friends? I already told you all before that here I keep my phone on silent, and I tell you all if my phone rings twice, I'm going to leave. But if my phone rang and it was my daughter, and I answered it, said, hey, I've got to step out, and I answered it, so a lot of people will think that is rude. They're like, you're paying for my time. I'm here to teach and talk to you all. In other cultures, if you're in a business meeting and your phone rings and it's your daughter and you don't take it, that would be rude. That would signal to me bad. Like, oh, you're not going to talk to your own family like right now. Like nothing we're doing is more important than that. And that's the idea of in-group collectivism. Gender egalitarianism. This is the extent to which society minimizes gender discrimination and inequalities. We do talk a little bit about diversity today. Diversity is unique. The United States, I believe, has scored. It's weird how they score it. In gender egalitarianism, and I don't think maybe this is controversial. I'm just saying what it says. The United States is actually one of the more diverse countries in the world, and we actually are really, really good about diversity equality compared to other countries. Gender egalitarianism, the United States scores fairly high, but not as high as other countries. It's because a lot of the ways they score it comes down to like pay differences. And there's a million studies that explain why there's a pay difference between men and women. And then you can read all those and decide what you want to decide. But what is really interesting about gender egalitarianism is, what countries have the highest ones? Do you know what countries have the highest gender egalitarianism? In that gender it's the most, there's not as many gender differences, right?
I want to say like the Nordic countries.
What do you say?
Nordic countries?
Yeah, they crush it.
Yeah.
So all the Nordic countries are #1 in gender egalitarianism. If you're a history buff, that'll make sense to you, because if you go back to like the old Danes and stuff, they were actually even like the Vikings were very progressive with their women, right? Like women could own land and they could fight alongside the men, right? And
they both raped and pillaged across all Europe together.
Yeah, they got to rape and pillage across all Europe together. But what's also interesting about the Nordic countries, and this is something that science thinks is fascinating, is they are the highest in gender egalitarianism. So they minimize gender discrimination, but they also have some of the highest separation in gender roles. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's they found that the more gender choice you get, so like if there truly is no difference in like stigma around what men do and what women do, then they actually tend to self-select more. So like over 90% of nurses in Nordic countries are women, right? Whereas here in the United States, we kind of did a weird flow where it was like all were women because we were like, you can't be a male nurse. And then now we're like, it's more accepting to be a male nurse. So men started entering the field again. My best friend's a male nurse. Starting to enter the field. But according to the Nordic countries, the more non-discrimination you get, then you'll start selecting out more balance. They also have like STEM tends to be, or certain STEM fields tend to be more male dominated, and like manual labor is more male dominated there, stuff like that.
I know culturally though, they still have a lot of gender problems in like Sweden.
Really? I shouldn't know.
Like they've been competing with the UK for having the highest like rape statistic across all of Europe.
Oh,
like
those type of gender problems. Okay.
Yeah, like 70% type shit.
Yeah,
bad.
I only know this stuff well within a business context, which the Nordic countries do this great. They've almost eliminated gender discrimination from what we can tell. Assertiveness, that's pretty self-explanatory. Future orientation, how much are you worried about future investment versus the now? Performance orientation, which this sounds funny, but how much do we reward performance improvement? Like how important is performance to us? Here in the United States, it's extremely important to us. You do your job, we care about your performance. Bad performance, you are fired, and we all deem that acceptable for the most part in the United States. We deem if you don't do your job well, bad performance, you're gone. And that's acceptable here, not always acceptable. And then human orientation, how much do we put value into things like being caring, generous, fair to others, stuff like that. These are some of the country breakdowns. These are just, the only thing I put here was the highest and the lowest in each for the most part. Yeah, there you go. Poland, Denmark, Sweden for gender egalitarianism. Germany pops up in here a lot. They're like very, very collective, very assertive. I can't remember what the United States is. United States is high in assertiveness, pardon me.
I love how Russia's the head of the lowest in uncertainty, avoidance, and future and performance-based orientation.
Yeah. I probably pulled these in like 2023. So I guess they could have slightly changed, but not really. Cultures change very slowly.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah, like truly. Now, yeah, it's like 6:30. I've gone for an hour. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pause here. We're going to come back. I'm going to talk about some other culture variations. Then we're going to talk about these differences here. And then I think we're basically going to call it. We're going to talk about cultural intelligence. That'll kind of be the last thing. Cool? Cool. I'm going to pause. All right, team. We're going to knock this out. Get this done. You can all go on fall break, doing whatever you do. It should probably work with less school. So other cultural variations outside of GLOBE. The GLOBE project is pretty cool. It's fun to read. Other ones, we obviously have to consider things such as language, interpersonal space. Like in the United States, we tend to conduct business between 1.3 and 3.1 and 3.4 feet. Wow, 1.1 would be way too close. 3.1 and 3.4 feet compared to Asian cultures where it tends to be slightly further. This sounds funny, like I'm pretty precise, but you all have an internal sensor of when someone's too close to you, I promise. And it's built a lot through culture and also personal preferences, right? This is my ideal distance. I'm far. I don't like people close to me. but other times, that's something when you get kids, you got to get used to your nose. They're all right there, man. They all talk to you nose to nose. Communication. I don't want to confuse people here. I talk about how in the United States, relationships within organizations are so important. We're very interpersonal focused. However, we treat business as a task, whereas somewhere such as China, a lot of Asian cultures, it tends to be more relationship based. It's you working for me is a relationship between the two of us. And you doing well is essentially you showing respect to me, right? And building our relationship. In the United States, even though your relationships do matter a lot within businesses, we do tend to consider it more task-based. Now, to give you guys a little side tip really quick on that, it's important. There have never been a study that has shown that brown nosing is bad for your progress in an organization. My wife has heard that. I taught her that, and she loves it, and she has used it for her whole career. She tells all of her employees that. sucking up to your boss, right? Building a true close relationship with them has never been shown to actually negatively impact your career. Right? It's generally only positive.
Yeah.
Right? Just other coworkers don't necessarily like it. But I don't care if this is recorded. Rick is the head of the department. His office is right beside mine, and he keeps a whiteboard outside his office. And before him, the head of the MBA was there. And every day on Mondays, when I come out of my class, I write a sweet message on that board, and I put my name at the bottom because I want my boss to walk in and say, "Oh, look at Seth, a great team player." Right? It only benefits my career. So, and I do mean it. They're great people, but still. Anything else important here? Religion. Different involved within different cultures. Law is obviously a complicated one. But now, also I did put time orientation. To expand on what I put here, we also, in some cultures, when you say a certain time, it's very low context, very, very specific. Be here at this time. It's rude to be late. Other cultures, obviously, more flexible with meetings, more flexible with time. Been told that being early is rude, stuff like that. But here, we expect you to be on time or early.
You know, in Germany, it's weird to be early.
Yeah, see, that's different. Here, it's weird. Like being early is like expected.
Yeah, 15. If you're not 15 minutes early, you're 15 minutes late.
Yeah, you're late. Yeah. So we'll go through these last kind of quickly because I want to get to CQ here. In high power distance cultures such as China, Russia, Mexico, decisions are made at the top and followed down without much questioning. In a lot of the Nordic countries here in the United States, we're starting to go into more of a low power distance culture. We believe in things being more flat, and therefore decision making should be through team input. We expect our managers and even our CEOs to treat their employees well, and we expect there to be pushback from the lower or the bottom up. You see things like Wells Fargo happen where there's not that, and bad things happen in an American culture. And because of that, and that's in an American culture, right? That happened in an American culture, and it was contrary to what we expect. We believe in lower power distances. That's definitely changed in things such as academia, and academia professors were like untouchable, rain, hellfire, and everything, right? And were feared by students for a long degree. The way I was taught, and what's becoming now is that it's way less that, and it should be. And that's more how the United States has moved. That's why I prefer Seth outside of this. I also found out I'm young. I just found out I'm really young in this department. Do you know that?
Yeah.
Real young. I'm like the youngest faculty in the business college by almost 10 years.
Wow.
I don't doubt
To
it.
my knowledge. From roughly what I know about the age of the people that I think are close to me. Most of them are like 40 to 42. But I went straight through school for the most part, I didn't really have a life. So, I'm just up here talking. Speed of decision making in the United States, we pride fast, quick decisions. If you're ever working in the United States, working in a country such as Germany, and someone asks you a question or asks you to make a decision, we pride people's abilities to make quick choices that are assertive and, they make that decision. If you talk to a lot of managers here in the United States, they'll say they pride more on someone that makes a quick decision that's good enough, but they make it quickly and they stick to it, right? We big belief in that. Versus the person that takes a long time to make the perfect decision. We pride ourselves on quick decisions. However, in other cultures, that would actually be seen poorly. If you made a quick decision, it would almost appear that you're being irrational or not taking it seriously. So if I say, what should we do? And you just tell me what we should do, here we're like, good, wow, look at that guy making great decisions, quick on the ball. But other cultures would be like, wow, they don't take their job seriously, or you didn't even consider it, Lucky for me, if I work internationally, I make really slow decisions. So it's perfect. Communication and conflict resolution. We are low context culture versus high context, which also means that we believe in direct communication where we specifically say what we mean. If I have a problem with somebody, we expect you to say that you have a problem with them. And the best way to solve problems, our belief here in the United States, Germany, the UK, is if you have a problem with an employee, is to one-on-one have that conversation with them directly and solve it right then. High context cultures believe in more indirect communication, heavy reliance on social cues. So instead of having a direct one-on-one conversation with your employee that says, hey, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you are gone, you have more conversations that are like, the team is not doing very, very well, and those that aren't performing well, we're really counting on you to do better in the coming weeks so we don't have to make changes. Stuff like that, right? Fun, nice, that everybody should understand within that culture. But here in the United States, we'd be like, you didn't tell me. If I didn't get this done, I was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to know exactly. Much more I want to go through here. Not much more. We're going to go right into CQ. So CQ, you don't get to hear this one very often, but you should hear it more. CQ is correlated with EI, so emotional intelligence. The definition of CQ, the best definition we get, actually comes from Harvard Business Review in 2004, which is the ability to function effectively in culturally diverse settings, or an outsider's seemingly natural ability to interpret someone's unfamiliar or ambiguous gestures the way that a person's compatriots would. So basically, you go to a culture or a country you've never been to before, and you have an innate ability to understand their culture, or you've been there so much you've kind of developed this. Do you know who Ari? I think it's Aria Smith. I believe his YouTube channel is like XIACOM or something like that, which is like Sham.
The guy that goes around the world and
Speaks
talk himself
languages.
up to
Yes.
top. Yeah.
Or talk himself up to the top.
Well, you talked about.
Oh, I talked about that different guy.
Oh,
That
really?
guy's great too. This guy's American. He's from the United States. That guy's from the UK or Australia, I think. That guy's great too. He talks himself up. This YouTuber you've probably seen him. He speaks dozens of languages. Dozens. Think about that. Dozens of languages. You've probably seen his videos, or if you scroll through TikTok, you've seen him pop up randomly on one of your feeds at some point, I promise. But they actually did a cool little study on him. I believe it's in one of his videos where he did like a sleep study where they like studied his brain to see like how it functions, and they study while he's learning languages. And his brain is actually different than other people's because he learns so many languages. He's always asked, like, how do you learn languages so quick? Because he literally sets down, like in one of his videos, he learns this African dialect and he studies it for 2 weeks and he's fluent enough in it to speak with anybody in it. Now that's, if you ever try to learn a language, that's possible.
Yeah.
They studied his brain and essentially he's got ridiculous neuroplasticity. He can just, it's an innate trick about his body. He can just remember languages really well, right? Well, because he has this weird natural ability to learn all these languages, he also has this weird natural ability, because he learns all these languages, to understand all these cultures. So in his videos, he constantly is going to different people in different cultures and speaking. Now, one, being a white dude that speaks different languages, automatically, if you've ever gone internationally, seems to make people like you. I think it's a bad look on Americans because we don't speak a lot of languages compared to the rest of the world. And so I think when some dude comes in and does, it's like, wow, that's just an assumption. That's just my opinion. But he basically has the highest CQ I've ever seen in my life. He just understands cultures. He speaks all these languages, which isn't necessarily a precursor to having high CQ. But he definitely has a natural ability to have high CQ. I highly suggest you look him up. His videos are funny. He's very family friendly. He's great. Made tons of money, I'm pretty sure, just being able to speak languages. So CQ breaks up into 4 components. We have CQ: drive, knowledge, strategy, and action. Drive, interest, and confidence in functioning in diverse cultures, understanding cultural norms, values, and practices, ability to plan and adjust when engaging with different cultures, and adapting verbal and nonverbal behavior appropriately. So the people that are able to be chameleons within different cultures. Now, how do we develop it? Being a good international manager, you would have to have high CQ. Even though it is innate, it is something we don't understand super well. But we do understand it is something that you can develop it. Out of all these things I have up here, the 2 best ones by far are studying cultural frameworks, which means studying it, and also increasing cultural exposure. If you speak multiple languages, or if you traveled abroad in college, or if you worked abroad before, and you were putting your resume out on LinkedIn, it immediately shoots you up to higher places within the pecking order, like in like a job application. Having international experience, everybody wants it because everybody works so international now. Now, this is an opinion, okay? I remember reading a study about this one time, but I don't recall the details enough to relay it here as fact. One thing here, again, I'm the United States, local, came from here. One thing the United States we struggle with is I think sometimes I've noticed in our culture, or at least people I've worked with that don't travel as much internationally, are almost afraid to ask questions or engage with people internationally for afraid of being offensive, right? Like we're very afraid to be offensive. I know that for a fact because my wife's name is Jael Shamar, okay? I have had students and people in the world struggle to ask the question, what ethnicity is my wife or where is she from? All the time. If you ever catch my wife at a certain time, like usually like in the summer, she looks more exotic than she is. She's mostly white, but she's also a little bit Japanese and a little bit Native American, right? So she's a little bit darker. But I've had so many people stare at me and be like, Jael Shamar, that's so interesting. Is she where is she from? And I'm like, here, the United States. Like, oh, okay, but like what is she? Like that, right? But if you get around her family that's all from all over the world, they're just like, you born here? I'm like, yes. And it's like, okay, but what are you? Like, you got to be like Japanese. Like, that's what, it's very, very straightforward, right? But I think speaking with a lot of like domestic managers, I think sometimes they're afraid to be offensive, and that almost comes off as offensive, like not understanding, right? Versus being more accepting as asking and understanding, right? My wife's family helped a lot because they're all from all over the place. So I can't even remember all the time where each of them are from. Like it's Cambodia, Japan, South Korea, not Japan, Cambodia, South Korea, Thailand, China. I don't know. It's a lot. That's CQ. We're not going to talk too much about this. I already gave you a few tips of advice. I will give you one other thing here. I'm just going to close this out. These are just some tips for everybody really quick. Most of you, again, there's a good likelihood you're going to work internationally. Common mistakes that people make, and this may sound simple to some of you, but I promise they're going to happen. It's not paying attention to time zones when you're setting meetings. That's a big one. Pay attention to your time zones. It's very, very important. Be more cautious about talking about money. We're trying to push here in the United States that it's more accepting to talk about money within, like we have laws that protect your ability to talk about how much you make with your coworkers, right? And it's more acceptable to talk about money here, not acceptable other places. In some cultures, it's more acceptable to talk about religion than it is in other cultures, and that's up to you if you feel comfortable about doing it or not doing it or however. Some cultures, it's more acceptable to talk about politics than it is here, so make sure you pay attention to that. Other things, some cultures believe that if you're working within the hours of the normal operation, you should be dressed for the job. But if you're outside of that, it's almost weird to be dressed for the job. Other cultures believe that if you're having any sort of meeting about the job, you should always be dressed well for the job, right? So these are all weird little things that people miss. The funny one is the time zone one. I don't know why that's such a funny one that I have to push, but people mess it up all the time. I've missed meetings because people have scheduled stuff, but I will end with one quick quip here, and that is I worked with somebody on a research paper who's originally from Vietnam, and she traveled back to Vietnam during the summer, and she definitely was okay leaning into the power dynamic and completely forgot that we were working in different time zones. And she would email me at 2 and 3 a.m. and ask for me to send things back within an hour. And I was such a scared PhD student that I just did it every time. I just wake up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. to a message from my professor in Vietnam and be like, yes, ma'am. I just do it right then and send it over there. But she had forgot that we were in different time zones. What's up?
Interview question. I'm at a
lecture question.
Lecture question.
Yeah.
There we go.
Do you have a lecture question? Is that what you're about to tell me?
No, I thought you were about to end recording.
Oh, no. I'm not ending it just yet. But we're about to end the recording. There is a case study on here, but we're not going to go over it because we've already gone kind of long here. So we'll keep it really, really simple. For the lecture question today, please tell me if you do anything for spring or fall break. And if you don't, you can just say no. I'm actually interested because it used to be all my students would tell me where they're traveling for spring break or fall break, sorry. Or they would say, oh no, I'm just staying at home and I'm going to hang out. But I feel like all my students now just work. So, so please let me know. We are getting out a little bit early because like I said, it's actually long for my Thursday class, but I appreciate you all. I will hang out here till everybody's gone. Thank you so much.